Have you ever walked away from a conversation and felt empty inside? Not because someone insulted you, but because a small question suddenly made you doubt yourself. Someone looks at you, smiles softly, and says in a gentle voice, "Why are you so sensitive?" Or, "You don't trust me." Just a few words. But as you try to answer, you feel something inside you tighten. You start explaining, then apologizing, then analyzing every detail. And when silence finally comes, you are no longer sure what is real and imagined. That is when you have been manipulated, not by threats, but by questions. They don't need to yell. They don't need to argue. They only need to make you start questioning yourself. And once you begin to doubt your feelings, intuition, or memories, they no longer need to control you. You will do it for them. I have been there. Once an old friend looked at me and said, "You're overreacting." That sentence was wrapped in care, spoken with a voice as light as mist. But when I laughed it off, something inside me broke. I began to review everything, to wonder if I really had gone too far, if I truly was the problem. At that moment, I realized this truth. Manipulators don't need to prove they are right. They only need to make you unsure that you are. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not true, do not believe it. If it is not just, do not do it." But what is not true rarely shows up so clearly in real life. It doesn't come as an accusation, it comes as a question. A sweet question spoken in a friendly tone, but designed to flip the balance of power inside your mind. The Stoics understood that game very well. They knew most battles do not happen out there, but inside the mind. You must choose between trusting your feelings or someone else. They believed true strength does not lie in responding quickly, but in the ability to pause. They observe, breathe, stay silent, and never let others decide the rhythm of their reaction, because the moment you react on their terms, you lose. That is why today, I want to walk you through 5 questions. 5 questions that seem harmless, but are powerful enough to make you lose yourself if you don't see what lies behind them. I am not speaking as a philosopher, but as someone who once answered all those questions, someone who was defeated by his own kindness and trust. I used to think being calm was enough, but it is not. Without boundaries, even your calmness can be used against you. And when I learned to see through the fog, I discovered that each question has a purpose. One to make you doubt your feelings, one to make you lower your reason, one to make you apologize for telling the truth, one to make you fear the truth, and finally one to make you feel ashamed of your own growth. When you understand those questions, you no longer need to win. You only need to stand firm, to look straight, and to stay silent at the right moment. Because sometimes your silence alone is enough for their mask to fall off. The first question is always the gentlest. It pretends to care, but is the first blow to your confidence. It doesn't want you angry, it only wants you to stop trusting your intuition. And it begins with a very familiar line, "Why are you so sensitive?" Question 1. Why are you so sensitive? This question sounds gentle, almost caring, but in truth, it is a velvet-covered blade. Why are you so sensitive? Sounds like concern, but if you listen closely, underneath it hides an accusation. You're weak, you're overreacting, you're not rational enough, and the moment you try to justify yourself, you have fallen into their trap. I was haunted by this question for years. In an old relationship, whenever I said I felt disrespected, she would smile and say, "You're being sensitive again." At first I laughed it off. But as time passed, I grew quieter because I started to believe maybe I really was too sensitive. I began to monitor every word, every emotion, trying not to make anyone uncomfortable. In that process, I lost the most important thing: trust in myself. That is precisely what the manipulator wants. They don't need to prove they are right. They must make you doubt your feelings. Once you believe your emotions are unreliable, they can redefine everything. What is wrong, what is right, what is real, what is false. They no longer need to lie because you have already stopped believing in your own truth. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If someone makes you angry, understand that they are merely testing your ability to stay in control." The Stoics never saw emotions as the enemy. They saw them as signals, as a radar detecting danger. When someone makes you feel uneasy, upset, or offended, that reaction is not weakness. It is an alarm that something is not right. Emotions are not always correct, but they always have a reason to exist. Manipulators understand that, and they try to turn that radar off. They call you sensitive so that you feel ashamed for feeling. They make you believe that calmness means silence, and composure means you are not allowed to feel hurt. But Stoicism never taught you to deny emotions. Stoicism teaches you to master your reaction to them, not to ignore or run away, but to observe. I remember the first time I realized this. I was in a meeting. A colleague said to me, half joking, half serious, "You're so sensitive, it's just a bit of feedback." I paused. I didn't laugh, I didn't argue. I replied slowly and calmly, "I'm not sensitive. I'm just paying attention." The room went silent. In truth, that is what they fear the most: awareness. When you stay calm but don't withdraw, when you neither justify nor bow your head, you reclaim control. Seneca once said, "The wise man does not get angry at insults because he sees their nature." And the nature of this question is manipulation through guilt. They want you to believe that feeling is a flaw, but in reality, it is a map. If you have ever been called too sensitive, take another look. Maybe you are observant, someone who senses what others overlook. The world needs people like that, but it also hurts them easily. That is why the Stoics train their minds like they train their swords, not to kill emotion, but to ensure emotion does not kill them. When someone says, "Why are you so sensitive?" remember, calm does not mean numbness. Sensitivity does not mean weakness. You do not owe anyone an explanation for your emotions. Observe them as Marcus Aurelius observed the weather. Notice them, understand them, then let them pass. This question is always the first strike because it makes you censor yourself. And once you begin to stay silent, they know they are winning. But once you learn to stay steady within, you will see them falter. Because manipulators never know what to do with someone who is not afraid of being misunderstood. Once you see through that game, you will notice that their tactics have changed. They will stop attacking your emotions and start attacking your trust. And the next question, seemingly harmless, is an even subtler trap. You don't trust me. Question 2. You don't trust me. In every act of manipulation, after they make you doubt your emotions, the next step is to make you doubt your intuition. You don't trust me. Sounds like a simple question, but it is a subtle trap. It turns your caution into guilt, your need for clarity into a sign of betrayal. I remember clearly the first time I heard this question. Someone I was once close to said it with a voice soft as air. You don't trust me. The question wasn't loud, it carried no anger, but it felt like a punch to the chest, making me feel like I was the one at fault. I wanted to recheck a few details because I needed more clarity. I found myself apologizing for asking questions, for not trusting enough, and so I went silent. Later I realized that absolute trust never needs to be demanded. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Truth does not fear investigation. Honest people are not afraid of your question. Sincere people do not need your oaths." The question, "You don't trust me," rarely comes from someone hurt by doubt. It usually comes from someone afraid of the truth being revealed. They are not seeking trust, they are trying to shut down inquiry. It is a refined form of attack. They shift the focus of the conversation. Instead of you asking, "Is this true?" they force you to answer, "Do you trust me?" And in that instant, you are pulled away from the question of truth and trapped in the maze of emotion of loyalty. Stoicism teaches that the wise do not let the emotions of others dictate their actions. Epictetus said, "No one can enslave you unless you hand them the key." Trust works the same way. Trust is not a gift given under emotional pressure. It is the result of repeated action of time and of truth. In my younger years, I used to think that I had to trust unconditionally to keep a relationship. But in truth, only those with nothing to hide are unafraid of questions. Those who fear being questioned often carry deceit within them. I learned this lesson through work. Someone once said to me, "You don't trust me. I told you everything's fine." But every time I tried to verify, something was always unclear. Later, when the truth came out, I wasn't angry. I was only disappointed that I hadn't trusted my own reason. A Stoic is not suspicious but observant. They trust but not unthinkingly. They understand that trust must be built on truth, not emotional pressure. You don't need to defend yourself when someone says, "You don't trust me." You can smile and reply, "You don't need my trust. You just need to tell the truth." That answer alone draws a line. It doesn't wound, but it doesn't allow anyone to cross. Honest people will understand it. Manipulators will falter because they cannot keep playing once you stop feeling guilty. Seneca once wrote, "He who has nothing to hide has no fear of the light." And I've come to see that those who constantly say, "Trust me," often need to be illuminated the most. They don't build trust, they buy it with sweet words. If someone truly cares for you, they will understand that trust cannot be demanded. It can only be proven. They will not ask, "You don't trust me." They will say, "I'll show you." And when you learn to keep that distance between emotion and reason, between believing and knowing, you will see more clearly who seeks the truth and hides from it. They will change tactics after making you doubt your emotions and pushing you to believe them without evidence. This time they will not attack your trust, but your self-worth. They will start planting questions that make you wonder whether you are a good, caring, or kind person. And if you rush to defend yourself, you've already stepped into their trap. From that moment, the conversation is no longer about the real issue, but about you trying to prove your goodness. When they sense you've lost your balance, they strike again, sharper and subtler. A question that seems harmless but is enough to flip the entire game. Question 3. Are you accusing me? Sometimes you want to understand something, not to accuse but to find the truth. Yet before you can finish your sentence, the other person looks straight into your eyes, speaking slowly but defensively. Are you accusing me? Just one question, and the entire balance shifts. The one searching for answers suddenly becomes the one on trial. From that moment, the conversation no longer revolves around their actions, but your attitude. I have been there. I began to sense something was off in a relationship that once felt grounded in trust. Not because I was paranoid, but because the details no longer matched. A deleted message, an unnatural explanation, and an averted gaze when I asked a question. When I gently asked, "Are you hiding something from me?" she immediately replied, "Are you accusing me?" For a few seconds I froze quickly, saying, "No, I'm just asking." But when I walked away from that conversation, I realized I had just been led. This question is a classic tactic, a sophisticated frame shift. They regain control by reversing roles. They turn their own defensiveness into a justified response by making you feel you are doing wrong. And you trying to prove that you are not harsh or controlling, you begin to step back, shrink, and bend your intuition. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best answer to anger is silence, but in this case silence is not surrender. It is an act of power, a pause that preserves control." When asked, "Are you accusing me?" the Stoic does not react, does not explain, does not attack. They stop. One deep breath. 3 seconds of silence. Then they respond calmly, "I am asking, not accusing. But is there a reason you feel that way?" That answer does one simple but powerful thing. It returns the ball to its rightful court. If they have nothing to hide, they will stay calm. If they build a smokescreen, you will see it in their reaction. The Stoic does not seek victory in argument, they seek clarity within. And once you hold on to that clarity, their words lose their power to pull you in. This question often appears where you least expect it, at work, among friends, and even within your family. It is a form of moral defense, appealing to guilt and the fear of being misunderstood. And once you start justifying yourself, you have already left the territory of truth. Stoicism teaches that when others try to shift the frame with emotion, you must return to reason. Your calmness becomes the mirror. When you hold intentional silence, others are forced to hear their own echo. You don't need to shout, you don't need to prove, you only need to stand firm in truth. I learned to say just one sentence, then let silence speak the rest. I'm not accusing, I'm listening. It is a statement that neither wins nor loses. It ends the argument but opens space for truth. In the end, truth does not need you to shout it, it only requires you not to run from it. But sometimes, when they realize they can no longer make you doubt yourself, they will turn to something softer, subtler, yet equally dangerous. They will sigh, look at you with weary eyes, and speak in a tone that sounds almost like an apology. "Can't we just move on?" That sentence sounds like a plea for peace, but truthfully, it is a cloth laid over a wound that has not healed. And that is the next question, whether you will choose truth or comfort. Question 4. Can't we move on? This question always arrives the moment you begin to touch the truth. When excuses stop working, when reasons run dry, they no longer fight back. They soften their tone, they sound tired, and then they say, "Can't we just move on?" At first it sounds like a plea for peace, but if you've lived through it, you know it's not an apology. It's a way to make you stop. I remember someone from my past saying this to me right when I was about to uncover the truth behind everything. I had seen the signs, felt the falseness behind the smile, sensed that the promises were no longer real. But when I tried to speak directly, she looked at me sadly and said, "Can't we just move on? I'm tired." So I went silent. I thought I was being kind, but in truth I had just buried the truth alive to keep something already dead. This question is not about forgiveness, it's about avoidance. It preys on the natural exhaustion of being human. Who doesn't want peace? Who isn't afraid of conflict? Who doesn't want to let things go? But the price of false peace is losing respect for yourself. Because true forgiveness does not happen through avoidance. Forgiveness comes only when you dare to face what happened and accept it completely. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." He did not add, "unless it's uncomfortable." The Stoics understood that truth is never the enemy of peace. only lies are. So when someone says, "Can't we just move on?" ask yourself quietly, are they seeking healing or trying to hide? A Stoic does not choose suffering, nor do they choose fake happiness. Joy built on denial collapses like a house built on sand. When you move past something you haven't understood, you are not truly moving on. You're just carrying the wound with you. The response doesn't need anger, it needs calm clarity. I will let go, but only when I understand. That is the boundary of a sovereign mind. You do not let others define what is enough, what is finished. You decide when your heart is truly at peace. It's the same at work. A mistake is hidden behind the phrase, "Let's not talk about it." A conflict is ignored to keep the harmony. We tell ourselves we're being mature, but often that's fear wearing the mask of maturity. Stoicism teaches that true maturity does not fear confrontation, because confrontation is how truth is polished. I once thought moving on was a way to keep the peace. Now I understand that real peace never needs to be covered up. It comes when truth stands in the open, when nothing inside you needs to hide. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's looking straight at what happened and saying, "It happened, but it no longer controls me." And when you are no longer easily swayed by guilt, emotion, or the longing for false calm, they will change their approach again. They won't apologize, persuade, or plead anymore. They will turn the tables by making you feel guilty for growing. A faint smile, a sigh, and a soft voice, "You've changed." It sounds harmless, but it's the final arrow aimed at the deepest part of your identity. And that is the fifth question. Question 5. You've changed. It isn't a question but a verdict hidden beneath a tone of sadness. You've heard it before. Maybe from someone you once loved, a family member or a friend who used to be close. They look at you for a long time and say, slowly, "You've changed." Not with curiosity, but with disappointment. At first it hurts, because inside that sentence lies an unspoken message. You're no longer the person I used to know. And in that moment you start to doubt yourself. Have I become colder, more distant, too rigid? But then you realize they're not sad because you've changed. They're unhappy because you're no longer easy to control. I used to be that kind of person. I used to apologize to keep the peace, stay silent to be loved, and lower myself so no one would get hurt. And then, one day, I was exhausted. I began to set boundaries, say no, and choose truth over comfort. And that's when I heard, "You're not the same anymore." I remember smiling softly, not out of pride, but out of understanding. Yes, I'm not the same anymore. And that is the best thing that ever happened to me. That sentence is one of the manipulator's final moves. When they can no longer make you feel guilty or silence you, they strike at what you value most, your identity. They want you to remember the version of yourself that was easy to handle, the one who tolerated, yielded, and forgave too quickly. They don't want you to change because change means they lose control. Marcus Aurelius once reminded, "If someone tries to provoke you, ask yourself, is this within my control?" You change the way you react. The way you choose to stay silent or speak up is the only thing truly within your control. And when you begin to master that, you step out of their game entirely. The Stoics never saw change as betrayal. They saw it as a return to a clearer, calmer, more honest version of oneself. Epictetus said, "No one is free who is still enslaved by the need for approval," and that is true. Absolute freedom is not being loved, but not needing approval to live in alignment with yourself. Let them say, "You've changed." Let them think you've become cold, arrogant, or distant, because only you know the change didn't come from bitterness but from awakening. Sometimes growth makes you lonely, but it's a clear kind of loneliness where you sit quietly with yourself and feel peace for the first time in years. You don't need to explain. You don't need to be understood. You need to live in truth with what you believe. I used to fear losing people. Now I only fear losing myself. And when I understood that I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone, the words, "You've changed," no longer wound me. They confirm that I'm on the right path. Because change is not betrayal, it is loyalty to truth, peace, and your soul. And when you've walked through these 5 questions, you realize each one is not just a tactic of manipulation, but a test of the mind. A test to see whether you can stay steady within yourself, see clearly what is real, and have the courage to choose truth over comfort. Because in the end, the Stoic does not seek to avoid pain. They learn how to stand still in the storm. And from that stillness we enter the final chapter, calmness. Calmness is the last fortress. When you have walked through those 5 questions, you begin to see that they are not merely tricks of manipulation, but mirrors reflecting your strength. No matter how softly spoken, each question tests whether you are calm enough to stay centered, explicit enough to see the intent behind it, and brave enough not to betray the truth within yourself. When someone asks, "Why are you so sensitive?" they test whether you will lose faith in your intuition. When they say, "You don't trust me," they are watching to see if you dare to place reason above emotion. When they counter with, "Are you accusing me?" they are trying to pull you down from clarity to make you apologize for seeing the truth. When they plead, "Can't we just move on?" they test whether you will choose comfort over honesty. And when they sigh, "You've changed," they are not grieving who you've become, they are mourning the loss of control they once had over you. The Stoics understood that every real battle happens within. Calmness is not coldness, it is the final fortress protecting your soul from those who seek to enter your mind. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be like the rock against which the waves break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the sea." You no longer need to prove, argue, or beg to be understood when calm. You stand there silent and precise, letting truth speak for you. It took me years to understand that. I once thought calmness was weakness and silence meant fear. But no. Calmness is the strength of someone who has walked through chaos and no longer reacts to every storm. Calmness is when you no longer need to win the argument, only to ensure no one drags you out of yourself. And calmness is when you are strong enough to say, "I understand, but I'm not playing this game anymore." So, if today you find yourself in a relationship, a situation, or a conversation that constantly makes you question yourself, remember this: you don't need to react. You only need to observe, because the one who sees clearly cannot be controlled. Write this down in the comments. I choose clarity. It is more than a sentence. It is a declaration that you have stepped out of someone else's game. Subscribe to Sovereign Stoic to continue this journey, where each Stoic lesson doesn't just help you understand the world, but enables you to master your mind. Calmness is the final fortress, and it has always been within you, waiting for you to step inside and lock the gates.